Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is Reganelite here with another Snowflake Talks. And today I have a very special guest with you guys today. And I'm really excited to have him on. He's a man with a van and he likes to talk about all sorts of things. It's VanMan Talks. How are you doing, buddy? Good to see you.
I'm good. I'm good. Thanks for having me on. And first of all, I'll just apologize to you, Regan. Like you approached me about a year ago about getting together and doing a live stream, but you used to do your live streams before on your Snowflake show at 9 o'clock, right?
Yes, it
And
was myself and Lee
yeah,
Corn. Yeah, Lee was trying to
and
arrange it with you.
I turned 40 this year, so I'm kind of like the guy that likes to be in bed at 9 o'clock on a work day. So I was like, oh mate, I can't do it. It's too late. But now you're doing it on your own and you're going a little bit earlier at 8 o'clock. So finally, but yeah, apologies.
It's
It's
past
taken
my
so long.
bedtime. I need to get some sleep.
But yeah, I'm happy to finally come on, mate. I'm sorry it's taken so long, but yeah.
No. It's all good. It's all good. It was Lee was Lee Corn, obviously, who's here in the chat. Good to see you, buddy, and everybody else who's here. Obviously, tried to make it happen. It didn't happen. But sometimes these things, sometimes they happen, and sometimes they don't. But I try to give, like you with lots of people, I try to give as much advance notice for people as they possibly can, because obviously, like, we all have working lives, we all have families and things going on. So I try to give people as much notice I possibly can, as possible. But for those who don't know you, tell us a little bit about yourself. I mean, about why. I mean, I guess the first question is that why did you start a YouTube channel in the first place? You know, you've grown a fantastic. I mean, your channel has done really exceptionally well. Over 20,000 subscribers, first of all, congratulations. Over 500 videos. And I just look now, you've had over 5.5 million people have viewed your videos, which is a massive success, I would really say, considering that you have a life, you have a job, you have a family to look after while also doing this. I mean, it's a fantastic achievement, you know, when you look at what you have accomplished with this channel of yours.
Yeah, that's well, those stats are pretty crazy. Yeah, it's pretty mental. When I think of the first videos that I made, when you just said millions of people watched it, the first video I made were goddamn awful. But you asked me the reason why I started. So basically, I guess I started the channel like a lot of people during the COVID period. I started it mainly because I was just a bit sick and tired. Like I'd always be on YouTube. I'd always be watching stuff on YouTube, and I was obsessed with what was going on, government corruption, all this sort of stuff. But I was also annoyed by the fact that YouTube seemed to be saturated with. I don't know. Do you remember a YouTuber, Alex Belfield, that went to prison
Yes.
recently?
Yeah.
He was sort of like the starter of all these sort of quite right-wing YouTube channels that were all sort of putting out the same sort of content. You know, they do stories about a crazy lefty student that wanted to take a picture down of the Queen or something like that, and then it would just turn to anti-immigrant stuff. And I was just getting a bit sick and tired. Like YouTube just seemed to be saturated with this sort of stuff, and it always seemed to be like it was the opinions of the working people and the working class. And I kind of wanted to try and change that stereotype. Like, no, not all working class people think like that and have these sort of views. And, you know, that's why I thought, well, why don't I start talking from the van? I mean, you can't get any more sort of quintessential working class than driving a van for a living. And so I just sort of started just voicing my opinions on, and like I said, my first videos were awful. If you ever go back and watch them, they're terrible. Literally the audio from my dash cam, I'd just be talking to it, driving over the potholes, you know. And then just gradually, just over, I guess it's 3-4 years I've been doing the channel, you just learn things as you do YouTube channels. You try and do a little bit more editing, a little bit more clean this up, and then it was because I used to talk about all subjects really, but then it was specifically a Brexit video. You know, it just turned January 2021. Brexit finally come into effect, and I'd done a video moaning about that, and it kind of blew up. And then it just sort of went from there. And you know, I absolutely love it. Like you say, juggling everything, life, family, and all things like that. It is difficult, but it's a hobby. but you do have to balance it because it does take over, because
Yes.
it really does.
I think I
But
really
yeah,
I think I really want to point, because you've stated this many times on your channels of how you've taken extensive breaks on the channel as well. But I think not just because of the work, but more for your mental well-being more than anything, because of how much it can really, because it's a lot of negativity that comes at you, not just obviously the news and the things that you're talking about, but also comments as well. Even though you brush it aside, it's a lot of weight, especially when you have so many other things going on in your life. How important is it for you personally to sometimes take a step back and just say, look, I need to take a break. It can be a bit overwhelming for me.
Yeah, very important. Not just for us that are making political videos, but I think people that absorb a lot of political content in general anyway. I think I sort of, there was a point where, because of the YouTube channel, and I was diving into politics so much, and it kind of got quite overwhelming, and I thought, you know what, I think I have to give this all up completely and just take politics out of my life, because it was just so absorbing. And I took about a month off. I didn't absorb any politics at all, but you can't, if you're that way inclined, if you've got this sort of interest in politics and what's going on in the world, and basically just care, you can't give it up completely. So then I just sort of thought, we have to try and find a balance. And this is what I say to my viewers, and I'd give the advice to anyone that's doing political content. The way that I balance it, I sort of dedicate just a couple of hours a day to politics and the videos. That's my balance. Everyone has a different balance. But you mentioned comments there. That's a big thing that I think so many people suffer with, especially with Twitter. I mean, I've had many rants about I despise Twitter. I think it is the worst form of modern society, Twitter. I think it is poison. I think it is just pure poison, where just everyone just gets together to argue at each other, and people's lives get absorbed by Twitter, where they're just spending all day just arguing with each other, and they're having negative interactions all day. And I've often said, like, if this was in real life, imagine if in real life all your encounters with people were negative, were angry, were snipey, were trying to prove you wrong. You'd suffer incredible mental health, which is why so many people do on social media. So when it comes to comments, negative comments on my channel, I still try to take a stance where I just don't reply to anything negative. But that's really difficult as well. Especially when someone comes on and just says something just blatantly wrong, and you just,
it's just like
hard, just like, no, just shut it up.
I had one negative comment. I had one comment yesterday. Like, I started my live stream and I was like, a bit annoyed, because someone basically said, basically implying that I didn't read the Labour manifestos, and I was like, I started I was doing a live stream yesterday, and I started it for saying, apparently someone in the comments said I hadn't covered the manifestos, and I literally just pulled up the playlist of all the manifestos that I covered during the 2024 election. And it's just like, yeah, apparently I didn't cover them, guys. Apparently I didn't spend like 4 hours of my time covering the Labour manifesto, 2 hours in one live stream, 2 hours in another. Apparently, it's just like,
that's what I'm saying. It's hard to not answer back at those sort of stupid comments.
Yeah.
But honestly, your life is better if you don't. I mean, we all have a keen interest in politics. We all care what's going on in this country. We care about this stuff. Otherwise, we wouldn't be invested in it and trying to source out material in the news. But just snipey, negative, you don't need to have that side. You can be into politics. You can be into social media and watching channels like yourself and things like that. But just that side of the snipey arguments are just, it's never good. It's never good.
Yeah, and it's always nice to get positive comments. Like Hazel Luck here says, "Love you, VanMan, and your videos are awesome." Thanks for that comment. I just want Lee Corn has a question for you. Is the music that you use your own, by the way? Just Lee wants to know.
Yeah. So the theme tune that I use on my videos is my old band from about 10 years ago. So I have another channel which is I don't post enough videos on it actually, which is VanMan Talks Metal, which is all about my love for metal music, and all my band's music is on that that YouTube channel. So you can go check that out if you want to.
Link is
VanMan
in the
Talks Metal.
description, by the way, for that one, guys. Not just obviously VanMan's channel, but his metal one. These are the link in the description as well. I'm not personally into metal. We'll talk a bit about music later, because I do want.
Well, you should have a side channel for your love of wrestling, right?
Well, funny you should say that. I actually started
you already
today.
have.
I started it today. I literally officially started it today. I'll talk a little. I haven't
awesome.
put a link in yet for it, but I'll talk about it. Or maybe we'll talk a little bit about it later. One Angry Pagan is a fellow metalhead here. Well, you should subscribe to his metal channel then, if that's the case. Then, yeah, there you go.
That's what I'm saying about the balance in life. You've got to make time for your hobbies and enjoyments. Obviously, your thing is wrestling, Regan, which you have a passion and love for. You know, you can't be absorbed by, you know, I do encounter a lot of people, especially in the comment section and, you know, on Twitter, that seem to just absorb their whole life with just, oh God, what's going on in Ukraine? What's going on in Palestine, all this government, and just their whole life is absorbed with this stuff. And
it's very consuming. But it's so important. Like, it's so important to strike that balance. I mean, I do use Twitter, but I mainly, if people do follow me on Twitter, they know that I barely talk about politics on there. It's mainly about wrestling that I tweet or respond to tweets or whatever on there. And I see more positive than negative, because of the algorithm, because it doesn't lead me to a lot of negative political stuff, because I don't normally respond to it. I mean, 9 times out of 10, if there's something really negative, I'll just block the person, because it's just like, I'm not going to even waste my time engaging. I mean, I do have a TikTok, but I don't bother, like, I don't engage on there, because again, like, it's just enough. Of course, engagement and with people is good, but too much of it can be really bad for you, and especially if it's a lot of negativity all the time. And it's like you said, I think it's about striking a balance, and everyone has their way of dealing with it. But I couldn't agree more. It's obviously a really important how we strike that balance. But
yeah, I mean, you can use, like you said, you know, people are very good at using Twitter and things like that. Right. I think it's just that activity of engaging in arguments that I just have a serious problem with, which so many people seem to. And it's not just Twitter, you know, Facebook. Geez, it's not even politics as well. You go on Facebook, there'll be a thread of someone selling a Hoover, and there'll be a giant argument about it. Oh, why don't you chuck that away by now? Why are you getting involved in my advert? You know, people just have this love of just getting into arguments online, and it's such a strange phenomenon that we've only seen over, you know, the internet age. It doesn't happen in real life, does it?
Well, it's just tribalism. The tribalism in football is that exactly. There's literal, like, because I'm deep in wrestling. There's online, there is serious tribalism in wrestling, which is ridiculous. When it's absolute nonsense for people just trying to stir up hatred for no reason. It's the same thing in sports or any sort of thing.
In music as well.
Even in music as well.
Everyone wants to argue.
And people can do it because they are hiding behind a keyboard. They're not showing their face, and they feel that they can get away with it. And and for them, for some people, it's a case of, if they say something really negative or really overreactive, it gets really blown up out of proportion. As Phil McCracken says, Twitter needs a public health warning. This place is filled with sewage, even more than England's rivers. Well, it depends. It depends, I would say. I mean, if you're not, I mean, to me, it's like, it depends. Like, just to me, like, there are people on X or Twitter or whatever, or not Twitter, where, like, there are really good people that I follow that I engage with, and they're not negative people. But if you constantly are always coming across negative people all the time, it's easy to get that impression. Especially if you're always in the same topics with the same negative conversations all the time. But it is different for everyone anyway. On that, so I just wanted to ask, actually, because I just want to talk a bit more about. So, have you always been into politics? Has it been something that you've always had in all your life, or is this just something that's kind of grown on you? Like, where did your interest into politics come from? Do you think you know?
Yeah, so it didn't. I never had any interest in politics in my 20s.
Hmm.
I always voted in every single election. I always voted. During the 2000s, every election I always voted Labour, just because it seemed like that's what you do if you're a working class person. My family always voted Labour, but I just went through the motions. I was never really engaged, and I guess I got like a bit of an interest in politics. The first thing was when I watched the show The Wire. I don't know whether you've ever watched this show.
I
The
have
HBO
seen it.
show, The
Yeah.
Wire. You have. Incredible show, and that
Yeah.
really opened my eyes. Anyone that hasn't seen the show, it's a show based in Baltimore in America that mainly follows the drug trade, but it also has a lot of political corruption, and it follows a lot of things like that. And it really opened my eyes to a lot of things about the drug war and political corruption, and that got my interest a little bit. And then, strangely enough, my interest really sort of peaked in the early 2010s when Russell Brand was started doing his early YouTube stuff. I don't know whether you've ever seen any of his early YouTube stuff.
I wasn't really net deep into politics at that time. It wasn't until roughly around Brexit. But I've never actually gone back and watched any of these videos, to be fair. So
yeah, his early ones are really good. And I was working nights at the time, and he'd put out a daily video on YouTube where basically he'd just go through the Murdoch newspapers, he'd just get the Sun, and he'd just dissect all the ridiculousness over every single story, all the lies. And he'd then do the same for Fox News and just say, look at this. And it really opened my eyes. I was like, Jesus Christ, there's so much corruption. That really piqued my interest. And then voting wise, around that time in 2010 was when I moved to Brighton. I grew up in Worthing. It's only 10 miles down the road, but I met my wife who lived in Brighton, and I moved to Brighton. And around that time was the big push for Caroline Lucas to get elected in Brighton for the Green Party. So then I got quite heavily down with the Green Party in Brighton. So I was sort of helping her out with the campaign, and voted for her in both elections. And then you had Jeremy Corbyn, which I got quite wrapped up in at the time as well, and it just sort of developed from there. And then the YouTube channel, and then Brexit and everything. And it's just one thing I always say is that over the last 14 years, you kind of really can't be not into politics. I mean, there's just it just affects our lives now so much. I know it's quite a samey thing to say, and a lot of people say it, but I always think during the Labour years, okay, it wasn't perfect, they weren't amazing, but things just seemed to tick over. We didn't get scandals all the time. People weren't constantly thinking about politics all the time during those years. But during the Tory years, it's just scandal after scandal after scandal, and it's just you're absorbed by it. So yeah, that was my political journey.
I would absolutely say that that I think it's I mean, for us, obviously we've developed it into, like I wasn't really neck deep into politics until around Brexit. Really is when I kind of really took more of an interest in it. And I've said this before many occasions. If it wasn't for the YouTube algorithm driving me towards Robert Spears' YouTube channel, I probably would have been on the other side. Because of the
I've said the same thing about myself. The right algorithm pushing me in the right way, that's how easy it could have been. That's so easy to sway people's decisions on that.
Yeah, without a shadow of a doubt. And basically, I think, and it's just from him and from what I learned from him, and then it's just exploded from there. The real in depth into politics pretty much exploded from there, and I've been pretty much. Him and lots of others obviously have all grown pretty much since then. So that's pretty much where the politics has really come from. But yeah, I've said it. I someone who voted for Brexit, and I regret that vote. And when people ask me why did I vote back then, the thing I what was the reason that I voted? It wasn't to do with immigrants. It was something to do with EU laws or something. That was what was along the lines, because, and it definitely wasn't immigration or anything like that, because I was someone, as people know, I worked a lot in retail, and I worked with all kinds of different people from different backgrounds and cultures. So it never crossed my mind at that time and I still wasn't in detail into politics, but it never crossed my mind just how bad Brexit was going to be until you see it, until everything that occurred after it. But I think the best thing is obviously that yes, it was a mistake. Yeah, I voted for Brexit, but the most important thing is that I've learned from that mistake, which is something that
I've heard your story so many times.
Yeah.
So many people decided to vote for Brexit with anecdotal stories that they have. A friend of mine worked in a business where there was some sort of, I can't remember exactly what it was, but some sort of red tape where they wasted a lot of money because of an EU law. And that made him decide to vote for Brexit. And it's always the same thing. I always say it's always the baby in the bathwater situation. You know, that one anecdotal story of that one little EU law that maybe wasted a tiny little bit of money. You know, you throw away freedom of movement, you throw away our trade with Europe, you throw away all these incredible things. But so many people, when it's a real life story of something that's happened to them, they feel so passionately about it. My dad was the same. I've had my dad on the channel. He voted for Brexit. He always goes back to this story of a friend that he knew that worked in a baker's where there was an EU regulation and he had to change loads of his equipment or something. And that's why he voted Brexit. You know, these little anecdotal stories, I hear them all the time. And I've always said I never, ever blame anyone for voting Brexit. There's very, very passionate people, that have a lot of anger, and I understand if it's affected them personally, if they had hopes to move abroad or it's really affected their business or something, I can understand that anger. But I don't have any anger, and I don't have any anger for anyone that voted for Brexit, because I know that, like I said, I could have gone down that road so easily. The right algorithm would have done that, or the right anecdote that would have happened in my life that was something negative about the EU. It's because the whole framework for the referendum was like on an equal pegging, with these two options are equal, and they're not. And you know, I mean, Jesus Christ, when the Brexit referendum came along, I didn't know the first thing about EU trade and regulations and all this stuff, and I'm supposed to decide on this insanely important decision. You know, it's mental. It's absolutely mental. I don't blame anyone for voting Brexit, because you know, just the lies were just so strong, so strong.
I also think it's always like, I always have to stress this to people as well, because people forget this as well, is that they were all saying before then that we will not be leaving the single market and customs union, and that was always something that was said on the Leave side as well. So to me, it was like we were already lied to on that premise alone, because we were made false promises right there and then.
Just the sheer promise of we will be able to trade exactly the same as we did before. You don't even have to mention the words about custom union or single market. That was the argument from the Brexit side all the way along. Nothing will change. We'll be able to trade exactly the same. Well, that's just a pack of lies, isn't it? So, you know.
Yeah, it's it was a con, says Mark. Yep, it absolutely was a con.
Yeah, but Brexit, like I was just talking about my dad, and you know, did you have any arguments about this in life? Because you know, I really nearly came to blows with my dad over this subject.
So I do remember, I never got into an argument or anything, because I don't really engage with politics with my family too much.
Yeah.
I don't think we've ever had an engagement.
Good rule.
I don't know. Maybe it's just because I don't bring it up because I'm worried about what. To be fair, like my parents and my family and my partner doesn't really pay attention too much to politics. Like they knew that Brexit was bad. Was bad, but I never, like, when I made the decision to vote, I never like shouted about voting for it or anything. I kept my thoughts to myself about it, because I still wasn't like 100% convinced on everything. But it did feel like I did feel like, because of my job and everything, I did feel pressured to vote Remain. Like I did feel this sense of everyone saying everyone should vote Remain, everyone needs to stay in the EU, sort of thing, even though I didn't fully comprehend what the damage would be of leaving the EU. I mean, I remember my brother saying to me that he was going to vote Remain, and I can't remember the conversation we had, but it was never a case of like I had an argument with him or saying or tried to. I never advocated to anyone anywhere about voting for Brexit. I just kept my thoughts to myself. I wasn't really, like I said, I wasn't deep into politics until after the vote.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. Were you quite politically engaged at the time, or not?
No, I was not. I was not. I was like looking at things. Like I knew this was a big story because it was on the news all the time. So I was very much looking at it. But I wasn't that deep into politics till after, I would say. And then that's obviously when the algorithm and then everything else from there came forth, really. But whenever I talked about politics, whenever I have talked a few times with my mum and dad about politics, it's never been a case of I don't think we've ever had disagreements or anything like that. I mean, I think it's probably because because I remember my parents, they do read the Eye. They do read the Eye. They read local papers and they watch the BBC News at 6 o'clock. Like, I don't feel like that they're being like, whenever I have discussions with, I don't feel like they're being under an influence to think a certain way, sort of thing. I feel like my parents have common sense when it comes to whenever they read or talk about it with me, but they very rarely talk about it. But they've been, like many people, pissed off with the last 14 years of Conservatives, you know, the scandals and everything. Really speaks for itself. I didn't really have too many discussions with my brothers about politics, really. 9 times out of 10 about football or something else. But
yeah, I mean, the reason that I kind of got really passionate with my dad is because, like, I know he's an intelligent guy, and it kind of, like, our politics are generally the same. But he voted for Brexit and then he voted for Boris Johnson, and I'm you know, I'm like, is this the same? Like, that's why it hurt more, and you kind of feel like you have this moral obligation to try and reason with him. It's like, what are you doing, Dad? You know, what are you doing? And when we talk about, government corruption, when we talk about the wealth inequality and all these sort of things, we all agree. You know, we agree on these subjects. So it's so bizarre that he went that way, and you know, he completely regrets it now. You know, I had him on the channel. We had a long discussion about it, and yeah, he knows that he got completely suckered in, and yeah, that goes back to what you were saying about it's, you know, it's important that if you have changed your mind. What do you think if there was a vote today? What do you think the percentages would be?
I do think there'd be more people to vote Remain than Leave. I really do. Not just by polling, but the feelings. I feel like, I mean, I don't go out and ask people on the streets, but the feeling I have whenever I go, because for just a bit of an open book here. Me and my partner, we go to lots of places on the coast, like trips and whatnot, places away. We've been to lots of places around England, Brighton as well. And like I look around at a lot of places. Look around, like I do make a means to have a look around the town centre before we ever travel back, after we go to certain touristy places and whatnot. And I look around them, and I feel like a lot of places are run down, that they're not, that there hasn't feel like any kind of change. There are some places where places have improved under the Conservatives. There have been 1 or 2 places where that actually has shown to be the case. Plymouth, I need to do, Terry Regan. It's on my to do list. It is on my to do list, but I can only speak. I haven't gone enough times up to places up north, so I can't talk, and I can't speak in any way, shape, or form about the feelings and what people are saying up north. Only by what, like the likes of Politics Joe or Times Radio, or whoever goes up there and actually talks to people on the ground and asks them the questions that can we really know what people are honestly thinking. So I can't really speak for people in the Midlands and up north, but for places where I've been to and seen, I do feel like that lives have not changed, that things have not improved, that things have just carried on, that the high streets speak a lot of volumes. There was this YouTuber I used to watch quite a while. I can't remember what his name was, but he goes to lots of towns and he shows all the high streets, like all banged up and everything.
Yeah, like, there's a few. Wandering Turnip is one.
That's the one. Yeah, that's the one who I was watching. Yeah, and it really sparked an interest and just made you realize just how much things have changed over decades, not just years, but decades, of how much these high streets have, like, what's happened to them? What like do, and when you look and when you look around, do you like, it's the question I always say to people is like, do you feel like things have gotten better? Do you feel like your lives have improved? And it feels like that Brexit has changed nothing in people's lives, and people just still feel worse off. But some people may not think that it's directly Brexit, but it may just be a case of they're just looking for a reason to point their anger and frustration at something, and maybe Brexit's not it because it's not something that's talked about enough by the mainstream media. So maybe they turn that anger and frustration towards immigration, or by whatever politicians are talking about or on the subject, or cost of living crisis, or because of what happened, what the war in Ukraine, or COVID, or something. It's I don't know if enough people think that their problems are all because of Brexit. It's hard for me to gauge whether that is the case, but
It's just hard. It's always been hard to gauge because of COVID, isn't it? Really, you can't really. It's so foggy to miss. You can't really tell the effects. You know, those in the know. No, but I still think that it really is now just the hardcore Brexiteers that are still hanging on to this. I think if there was a vote tomorrow, I'd go as far as 70% in Remain. I think enough people can see, like all the things you just mentioned, they can see that there is no tangible benefit to Brexit. Immigration is up, our towns and cities are in disrepair, nothing is better, businesses are suffering, there is no tangible benefit to Brexit. And I think the majority of people know that now. And that's the thing with the Brexit vote. You have like the hardcorers on either side, vigilantly, we need to stay in the EU, vigilantly, we need to leave. And then all the people, probably like yourself at the time, that not crazy politically engaged, that just had to make a decision because it's democracy. We need to have a say, and they're floating. And now, if you asked them now, they'd say, "Well, no, there's no real tangible." Especially the ones going on holiday now are, you know, having to suffer those effects. I can't get the same phone deal when I'm abroad. I have to queue in a different queue. All these little niggles. You know, for the person that's not really politically engaged, would just be like, yeah, what's the point? But your point is really interesting about the towns and cities. I'd love to go and visit a few more, actually. If I was doing this YouTube channel full time, which would be a dream. That's what I'd love to do. Just go visit different parts of the country, interview people. But the the decay of the towns and cities in the UK is terrible. And I don't need to go ahead. I can see it here in Brighton. Over the last 14 years, if you look at Brighton back in 2010, and if you look at Brighton now, I don't know when you last visited Brighton.
It was a few years ago. I've been to Brighton a few times, but it was a few years ago. But like, obviously you speak for Brighton, so how has it been?
There's
Go on, you speak.
Yeah, I mean, there's two sides to the city of Brighton. There's the very rich, affluent side, and the seaside town where everyone comes down from London, and it's great, and there's amazing bars and restaurants, and it's great. But there's another side to Brighton, which is dark, which is, this is what I'm saying. The difference between Brighton in 2010 and now, homeless population must be 6, 7, 8 times it was. Brighton actually has the second largest homeless population in the country by percentage of population, just below London. The drug problems, the people on our streets with mental health problems that are all over the streets of Brighton. This wasn't like this 14 years ago. This was not like this. Okay, and it's just a reflection that we just don't care about these people. There's a massive slice of society that in Brighton that are just left to rot. Society doesn't care about them. Government doesn't care about them. They've got all sorts of problems. They're from broken homes. They've got mental health problems, and they're just left on the street to use drugs and be homeless. And just the decay of the city itself as well. I don't know if you remember down the promenade, we used to have these glorious, beautiful Victorian arches.
Yes, I remember them.
Brighton.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
In 2010, they were maintained. They looked great, but you know, Tory austerity comes along, council funding gets cut. They're just overgrown, rusting pieces of crap, and it's just decaying. This city, the architecture's decaying. the citizens are decaying. And it's just it's so sad. It's really sad.
It is, yeah, it is. Farage is in Clacton for those who are asking where Nigel Farage is in. So no, you can't blame Nigel Farage for what's happening in Brighton.
Oh, he was actually in Clacton. I was going to say that's the first time he's probably been in Clacton since he got elected.
You probably move out of Brighton if he became your MP.
I'm sorry, mate. We ain't having it. We ain't having it in our town. You saw what happened when those rioters tried to come to Brighton. We said, no.
Oh dear, yeah,
that was having it. You're not coming to my town.
Yeah, those four people there, they were just had to be escorted out by the police for their own protection. But I wanted to ask, obviously, so you've had Caroline Lucas, who, you know, when we see Caroline Lucas in the House of Parliament, well, wherever she speaks, she just feels like somebody that really does, somebody who talks like she completely understands people's needs. That's how it comes across to me. And I think this is where, obviously, she was the first MP that come across to me as like this of the Green Party, is where I really come to learn about the Green Party, was through her, obviously. Obviously, you said, 14 years of austerity, the Conservative government, obviously, the cutting that they have done. I guess the question I wanted to put to you is, I don't know how much your engagement you have on in the local government level. Do you feel that perhaps it wasn't a case that Caroline didn't care, but she just couldn't do anything really to help stem this tide of austerity and whatnot?
It's completely powerless. One Green MP in Parliament. There's I agree. There was a lot of mistakes by the Green Council in Brighton. So yeah, Caroline Lucas was the first Green MP in the country for Brighton Pavilion. But the Brighton Green Council, it's Labour now, but it was a Green run council, the first Green led council in the country for a good few years. And they, unfortunately, they did make quite a few mistakes, and they did piss off a lot of the locals. I think with local councils, it's just about how to manage the little bit of money that you've got the best you can. I think because it was like the first Green Council, they were really looking to try and do some radical things. With cycle lanes, with recycling, and all these different things. They were really trying to make a name for themselves and do something radical. But I think in a Tory-led government, if you're a council of a city, you just have to just do the basics. Just try and run the council as best you can with the little money you've got. So they did make a few mistakes, unfortunately. I don't think they're going to get back in as a council. But Caroline Lucas as an MP, absolutely incredible. Like I say, I really got caught up in her wave in 2010. You know, it was really exciting living in Brighton at the time, the first ever Green MP to be elected, and she was the first politician that I ever saw actually talking about real things that matter to poor folks. You know, I'd never seen any talk about sort of, you know, massive investment in climate change can boost the economy if we get into wind farms and boost jobs and all this sort of basic left-wing economics. I've never really heard this at all from any other sort of politician at all. It had always just been keeping the status quo, even with the Labour government during the 2000s, really. So she really was a breath of fresh air. And you know, now we've got 4 of them in government, right? So it's is it 4? Yeah, it's 4, isn't it?
It is 4. Yeah, it will be. Obviously, I still think it's not a lot of influence, but I do hope that we do see them on committee, 1 or 2 on committee hearings. I don't want to see reform, but obviously they have 5 MPs, so they're going to be on 1 or 2 hearings in here and there, unfortunately. Which
it's a shame that, you know, you've got this thing with Jeremy Corbyn and the independent MPs coming together, right? It's a shame that they couldn't, because I mean they're getting together purely for a Palestinian cause, if I've got this right. You know, that's their main aim, I think, is it?
So I just actually earlier today, so I was just listening to a video on LBC. Jeremy Corbyn was talking to Andrew Marr. They were talking mainly about Grenfell, but he was asked obviously about this group and that, and he did point out that while obviously the main thing is about obviously pro Palestine and whatnot. There is a lot of policies that they do agree on, is what he stated. So they did state that there has been a lot of communication between them for quite a while, ever since the general election. So he did come across in that video that it wasn't just a case of just about that, it was about other policies and that and whatnot. And obviously the idea is, of course, if they are banded together, they got more likely of getting
but they're probably quite aligned with the Greens as well. I mean, I know they wouldn't officially join the Greens, but they're probably quite aligned in a lot of their policies, so they could group together and be a bit more
that is something that they like. I can see. I mean, there's no reason why we can't see like Lib Dems, the Greens, and the Independents like collaborating a lot more on certain things to try and take on the government on certain policies and whatnot. They may engage with the Conservatives on one or two maybe things, but yeah, I mean, there are obviously. I think, I've said this before. I absolutely do love the fact that we have a lot more diversity with different political parties in there. In the House of Commons, even though I know the system is crap. We know the first past the post system is crap. We know it needs changing. I think everybody here agrees with that. But at least that, even though we don't like reform, even though I'm not a fan of reform, and you have your reform subscribers and I have mine as well. Like it's different. It's a different political party to the Conservative. The Greens are different to the Lib Dems. They're different to Labour, and it's good. We need more diversity. I would like to say more political parties, more options for people, because I think one thing, especially if you're someone who's not into politics, I think people are just fed up of picking red and blue all the time. You know, there is that, like, I mean, like we got 400 Labour MPs, and it's like that's a lot of power that they have, you know, and I really would like to see a lot more of a fairer system. I think it's fair to say. You know, I don't want more reform MPs in the House of Commons, but if we have a proportional representation, that means that everybody doesn't have to tactically vote to get rid of this MP or get rid of this political party, and they can vote with their conscience. And if it means that we get 70-80 Green MPs, 70-80 Reform MPs, 120 Lib Dem MPs, and if we get the same amount of Conservative MPs, if not more, then that's fine, because it's what everybody can vote for, can vote with their conscience who they want to vote for. May not agree with some of the political parties, but it would just feel so much more fairer. I just think the system is just really, really unfair. But I also think that I feel like that based on the amount of MPs that we got in the last general election, I feel like we are slowly stepping in the right direction, which I think is a really good thing. I really do think so.
What are you actually hopeful that it will ever actually change? Because I used to be, but now I mean, what would make it change? I mean, he's not going to change it for the next election. So if Starmer got a second term, would there be enough push within the Labour Party? I've often thought, could there be a situation like with Brexit with the Tories, where half the Tory party pushed for Brexit so much that it came inevitable, there had to be a referendum? Could there be a situation in the Labour Party where enough of the members push for it? But then, you know, all the time they're in government, why would they? I don't know whether it's ever going to change. I mean, it feels the same as America. I can't see it ever changing in America. So why would it ever change here? I
really do think it's down to, if I'm honest, like a part of me is still hopeful, even when it seems like it's all doom and gloom. I just feel like America is impossible to untangle with the system that they have in place. I don't know. Like, hand on heart, I don't think we are completely and totally fucked when it comes to British politics just yet. I do think we're near it. I do think we're near that line. I really do think so. But I do think that
it would take a coalition, wouldn't it? That would be the only way. Like,
it would take a coalition.
Tories, it wasn't PR or anything
but it is important to like, I know I know how a lot of my viewers feel about this, but it is important to stress that the Labour members did vote for proportional representation at last Labour conference. That is really important to highlight. Yes, of course, he didn't put it in the manifesto. I know that. We're all fully aware of that. But is he going to ignore the members again for a second time around if they win the next general election? I expect Labour to win the next general election. I fully expect them to win. I don't see Kemi Bakanoff or Robert Jenrick knocking Keir Starmer and Labour off that top, unless, of course, they Labour implode themselves, which they are perfectly capable of doing.
So I guess the most advantageous situation would be a coalition with the Greens. Then, if you still think that there's no, I agree. I don't think the Tories are going to be strong enough to battle with Labour in the next election. But I see a lot of Labour supporters being upset with the Labour government not being left wing enough. That may push them towards the Greens.
He has ignored members at every vote, so why would he change? Says Phil McCracken. Yeah, I totally get that point. I totally understand that point, especially with some of the so-called purging of the Labour left, shall we say, within the party, as well as that's been going around as well. I don't like that as well. But the way I see it right now is a case of, like, I understand how people feel about Labour, and I'm and I understand those concerns, and obviously the criticism, like the winter fuel payment thing. He did not need to do that. He did not need to do the winter fuel payment. In my opinion, he could have found the money elsewhere.
Yeah. What's the deal with this now then? So he's going to put it to a vote.
So next Tuesday, I believe there's going to be a vote, and they're going to.
So they've already pissed off the pensioners now. I mean, even if they backtrack and don't do it, I think the pensioners are still going to be hurt.
They're going to whip the party.
So, I think the only problem that I had with that policy is just the threshold is too long. It's too low. It's not a bad policy. There's plenty of very, very wealthy pensioners out there that are getting a fuel allowance they don't need. But the threshold is £11,000 a year. If you're a single pensioner, if you earn over £11,000 a year, you're getting your fuel allowance taken away. That's less than £1,000 a month. That's basically poverty. That is, if you're earning that money, you're poor. So that threshold just needs to be lifted. That's all they need to do, is just bring that threshold to I'd say 20 grand. I'd say if you're earning 20 grand a year or over, you don't need the fuel allowance.
Yeah,
it's not a bad policy.
I'm very conscious because of when you listen to what the Conservatives are saying, I just like to me, like, some of their stuff makes sense, and it's like, yeah, but you guys fucked us over for 14 years. How can I take anything that comes out of your mouth seriously? So I try to be fair, but at the same time, I was like, no, I can't take you guys seriously, because you guys are not sorry for what you guys have done. But you've left the state, the whole of the UK, you've left it in such a bloody bad state for 14 years. And I just feel like, yes, like, I think the analogy I've put before is about, you have run really bad rotten apple. This is what I was saying before general election. Run really bad rotten apple, which is the Conservatives. And you have this bad apple, which is Labour. It's certainly not a clean, perfect apple, but it's better than the apple that we've been eating for the last 14 years. So you want to try something different, at least. Okay, it may not be perfect, but it's better than what we've been putting up with for 14 years. And I do have some hope. I do hope that we do see some change. And I'm not ready to throw Labour under a bus, because I said, like, let's see how they do under 100 days. Let's see what comes out in the budget, because the budget will say a lot about what Labour are going to do as well. Like, I think after the budget, there's not really, like, any hiding, shall we say, anymore of Labour. They have to show what they're going to do then. There's no like differing and whatnot. Like, and Keir Starmer literally said it. Like, if the pressure wasn't even more on him, he literally said it on his first speech as Prime Minister at Downing Street. Like, action, not words. That was his words. It's about the actions that he does. And we will judge him on the first 100 days. We'll judge him on the budget, and we'll judge him over the next few years. And I think that's, this it's all doom and gloom straight away. And it's just like, I've only been 2 months in, and there was a recess period as well. Like, we have to wait and see what they can do. Like, I understand,
Yeah,
and
I
people
more or
are
less
so
have the
keen
same
to bury
feeling.
Labour straight away, and I'm just like I'm not a Labour person in any way, shape, or form. And people who watch my channel, they know I'm not a Labour person. But you have to be a realistic as well. You've got to see what they can do. Like, I was prepared to give Rishi Sunak a few weeks at least, but then I realised very quickly what kind of person he was. But I mean, surely, you agree with me. Obviously, we have to see what they can do before we throw them
Yeah,
under a
no,
bus.
I'm more or less on the same train of thought as you. And when they first came in, I was really positive. Of course, honeymoon period. The Tories are finally gone. We've waited 14 years for this. But then straight away we started seeing like sensible policies. Straight away, Rwanda being scrapped. Yes, of course, that idea is bonkers. Straight away, the upping of the wind turbines and scrapping the oil and gas drilling. Of course, yes. Renewables is the future. Yes, sensible policies. I was like, great, yes. And then it just tripped me up when I understand that this is probably the worst situation this country has been in since the Second World War. I don't know whether you agree, but
I do.
With COVID, the way the country's been run over the last 14 years, I think it's as worse as it's ever been since the Second World War. Some would argue you need drastic action, then you need a Clement Attlee. But anyway, I understand that they're inheriting something absolutely insane. But then when I hear that they're making savings and taking money off of pensioners on £11,000 a year, I know it really didn't sit right with me. It really didn't sit right with me. But that's just one thing, and it looks like okay, they've seen the response now and they're going to put it to a vote. I mean, I don't know if all MPs are going to vote with their conscience and not be whipped. Then we'll see how that vote goes. But at least they have actually acknowledged the feedback on that and have now going to take it to a vote.
I think the
but
first.
Yeah,
I was just going to say, I think the first real negative that everybody got was the vote on the 2-child benefit cap that the SNPs put forward, wasn't it? Right? I think that was the first thing that really.
Yeah, thing is, I don't know the ins and outs of exactly how much that costs. So basically, there's a limit, 2 child. So anyone that's got more than 2 children, if you lifted that, that would be a hell of a lot of money, wouldn't it? But I'd like to see that, obviously. But I didn't have so much a problem with that because they said all the way through election that they weren't going to do that. They were up front. Keir Starmer got quizzed about it quite a lot on those Prime Minister questions on ITV and stuff. And he said, we're not going to do it. So at least he was up front about that. So I wasn't, I'd like to see it lifted, but then I don't know the ins and outs of exactly what that cost is. I mean, it's got to be a hefty amount. There's a lot of people out there with more than 2 children, but I don't know. But this is saying, at least they were actually up front and they said they weren't going to do it.
I do think that I think what I've said is that while I do want the 2-child benefit cap to go, one of the arguments that Labour supporters would say is that they didn't have a cost-effective way of removing they didn't have at the time a cost-effective means of removing it, like within a budget. So I've said that if they remove it, obviously within the budget next month, obviously it'll be a big positive because one of the consistent things that I've seen is that it would greatly get a lot of children out of poverty. Would greatly improve a lot of people who are struggling to feed their kids and whatnot. It'd just be a massive.
They're doing something with school meals as well, though, aren't they?
Yeah, I get. Yeah, it's breakfast clubs, I believe they're doing, but it's not. It's only breakfast, so it's not all 24. It's not breakfast, lunch, and dinner sort of thing. Like guaranteeing every single meal for them, which is something that another thing for me is like, yes, I'm happy that every single child is going to get a breakfast every
What does a
morning.
breakfast constitute? Is that a bowl of cereal? Or I mean,
That
if
again,
they could give a serious meal to every child, that would
yeah.
be
I mean,
something.
you're not going to put a full English in front of them.
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't mind that, but I mean, yeah, I guess that's also the question of what kind of of it as well. But for me, it's not. It was like, yes, that's great, but I would like it guaranteed for all meals, all the time, to ensure that children, regardless of whatever regardless of what it is, I mean, I understand if some people feel that, oh, why are we giving rich kids free school meals? I would rather, as a taxpayer, pay more taxes if it meant guaranteeing every single child in the UK getting a breakfast, getting a lunch, getting a dinner guaranteed. I'd be happy to do that because it would greatly boost our children's education and giving them a full belly of food, obviously allowing them to concentrate in schools. Obviously, yes, everything comes at a cost, but I think if a cost comes that actually improves the lives of especially our children, I think that's something people would generally accept. Like, would people really like? And like the question was, say, would you deny a child a right for a meal? I guess that's a tough one, really. But
it used to be means tested when I was a kid. Anyway, you used to have the kids that were from poorer backgrounds had the tickets for the free meals and stuff. I don't know whether it was the same when you were a kid, but I mean, that was scrapped.
no, I don't
Means it
personally
doesn't have to be a
remember it.
blanket meal for everyone.
Yeah, but it's yeah, but this it's the budget will say a lot, and I'm
It's the
prepared
thing.
to cut.
It's all about priorities, isn't it? I mean, this is
Yeah,
the thing with what they're facing right now. You've got starving children, you've got homeless people on the streets, you've got the NHS in crisis, you've got education standards, schools crumbling from the wall. I mean, literally every single aspect. So they've just got to go, okay, where are we spending the I don't know. We've got starving kids here, we've got homeless people here. It's like, where do you even start? Where do you
yeah,
even start on what's going on in this country?
and then I don't know if you've heard this today. There's a so there was an article that came out from Politico. I think Alex Political X covered it in a video, and someone else covered it somewhere else as well, about an FBI dossier reveals Putin's secret psychological warfare in Europe. So obviously, the Russian interference, has that been looked into by the new British Labour government? Have they told like MI5 and our British intelligence services to look into like the interference that Russia has had within UK politics? Have they done anything about that? And I actually went before, like, I think about an hour or so. I went and checked all the mainstream media articles to see, because there was only one or two places was talking about this, and I was like, is anyone covering this? Like, Guardian wasn't covering this. Byline Times hadn't covered this. Maybe they will because they have only just come out. Like Sky, BBC, Independent, Telegraph aren't going to cover it. But it was just like we have. This is just another thing that needs to be dealt with, and this is something that's going to be. Is this something that's going to be dealt with as well? I mean, is it a simple case of? Is it just a case of Yvette Cooper literally going to the MI6 and saying, "Can you guys deal with this? Like, get us a report on Russian misinformation and whatnot, and deal with that." Like, no one's been talking about that since Labour come in. And again, it's
Do you mean how they
problem.
deal with it going forward? Like,
Yeah,
how they stop Russian
yeah, we've
bots
heard
going?
nothing, not
What's
a peep.
happened has happened, but
It's
yeah,
just
it
another
needs to
problem.
be looked into going forward, because
Hmm.
there is, you know, you see it on social media all the time. This people's opinions being swayed, and Russians are heavily involved on Twitter. You see it all the time. So yeah, that's something that going forward needs to be massively investigated. I'd agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, I'll put the link in the description if anyone wants to have a look at it. It's yeah, FBI dossier reveals Putin's secret psychological warfare. So it was basically, I'll just Russia's information warriors identified Germany as a particular easy target for Moscow. Influenced US law enforcement has said. Russian operation to manipulate German, French, Italian, and UK politicians, business people, journalists, and other influencers. US government on Wednesday indicated 2 Russian citizens and seized more than 30 internet domains related to a campaign to influence the American election. Yeah, and this is something obviously that I'm sure is if people were to look into it and the mainstream media were to pay attention to it, obviously, like that is a big story. Obviously, right now the talk is obviously Grenfell because obviously the report has come out, which is understandable. But this is still something that is not really how I don't recall since Labour come into power. I have not, and sure, if someone wants to correct me if I'm wrong in the chat, I've not seen something somewhere where they've said they wanted to look at Russian interference or Russian meddling in British politics in any way, shape, or form since Labour come to power.
Do you think it's maybe a case that they can't do too much about it? What can you do? I mean, the biggest thing you mentioned America there. I mean, if you're Putin, of course, you're going to be putting all your emphasis on trying to get Trump to win. That's if you could do anything, if you could put all your resources into something, you would put it into Trump winning, wouldn't you? Because that would benefit him so much. So what, maybe we just can't do anything about it. Maybe that's why they're not.
Jal speaking from Portugal there. They have spoken Russian interference and the UK Secret Service was infiltrated. There were cases reported in Austria and Germany too, but they solved theirs. Not a word from the UK. Jal there, Jal from Portugal. He's always very knowledgeable when it comes to Portuguese politics there. Thanks for that. I'm not sure. There may be it's entirely possible that they may be talking behind closed doors behind it and we just don't know about it, because I remember like so many stories coming out. I think there was lots of exclusives coming out from the Eye about China hacked something here, or China or Russia influenced in this or this and that, and it was just like can the government like do something about this, because we're not supposed to actually be seeing this happening, but it's happening, and like, you want to do something about this? No, it's not good. It's not good at all. Ginny Bottle says, tax the rich, renationalize our power, water, transport, increase wages for the lowest, decrease bonuses and highways, limit profit for minimum education and NHS only. I mean, it sounds so simple, but it's just not as simple as that. I mean,
this is the argument, isn't it? This is the argument against Labour. It's like I just said earlier, after the Second World War, the Clement Attlee effect, radical change. But then the other argument is we're in trillions and trillions and trillions of debt. Our interest payments on our loans, if we borrow more, we're paying more interest. This is the big battleground, isn't it? Do you really go full on assault and sorting out this country in investment in every area, no matter what it costs, to eventually boost the economy? Or do you do the status quo, which is what Labour are trying to do, and just slowly build up the economy to try and fix these things? I don't know. I've never tried to say that I'm an economist, because I'm really not at all. It blows my mind sometimes. Economics.
No, I try to avoid articles on the economy, to be fair. I was just trying to find some, because I know there were one or two of you guys that add questions, and we may have missed them while discussing. So I do try and catch them whenever I can. One Angry Pagan has a question for you. An increase on onshore wind farms being built up has been seen here in Devon. Have you seen an increase where you are? In any onshore farms?
There's some over in Eastbourne way, but there hasn't been any new onshore for a while. We've got a massive investment on offshore. We've got loads in Brighton, offshore wind farms, but not a massive amount onshore. No.
Has that come up during the last 14 years, or is that as far as you're aware, or has that been
Yeah, I think that was about 5 years ago, the offshore one, because I mean, Boris Johnson, to all his all his flaws, he was actually a little bit into the old renewables. Boris Johnson.
He did talk about it. I mean, like, I just did. You don't do just a thing that come out of his mouth, but but I think it was just a case of, because it was popular, that's probably why he was for it. If it wasn't popular, he would be proper against it, I would say. I think. But
Boris Johnson just cares about himself. But he wanted, as he was prime minister, he just wanted something for people to remember him by. And before COVID in 2019, when he got elected, he was quite big on the renewable stuff. He was a big driver of the London. What's it called? The zone in London.
Boris bikes as well.
Yeah. Boris bikes. Yeah. So
It was,
he
I
didn't
think
say
it
that
was
it was.
actually
It
Ken
could have been
Livingston
something.
it was actually Ken Livingston's, but he just stole it and then just took the credit for it.
Yeah, but he just wanted something that people might remember him by. But now everyone would just remember him for being just a complete idiot and COVID and how. I always say this. If I'm going to ask you this question, Regan, actually as well. If you could pick any prime minister throughout the whole history of this country to be in charge during COVID, would Boris Johnson be at the bottom of that list?
No,
Or
I
is there
think Liz.
someone else
I
that
think
would be
Liz Truss would be at the bottom of my list.
really?
Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, I
be at
think
the
it's
bottom.
out of those two. Yeah.
The only reason I say that is because for me, it's not so much about her policy; it was her attitude. Ever since her attitude, like the way she responded to questions, the way she responded to the media, the way she responded in general was so much worse than Boris Johnson, so much worse. And it was just a case. It was just a case of I don't give a shit what anyone else thinks. I'm right, you're wrong. Like I'm not going to be swayed in any way, shape, or form. I do think there was some sway on Boris Johnson at least, but it felt like to me, Truss would not listen to anyone with any ideas or anything. That's the impression I had. So if you had someone like her during the pandemic, someone who wouldn't I mean, it would be worse for the scientists. I think we would have had even more deaths, far more deaths if she would have been prime minister, because I could just see that room.
Right.
I could just see that room right now. Them trying to get through Liz Truss' skull, trying to explain to her how bad things are going to get, and she would just still stick to her principles regardless. That's what I think.
She like Boris Johnson was really stubborn about this, wanted to go for the herd immunity thing, didn't he? He was stubborn.
Yeah.
He wanted to do it. He held out, and eventually the scientists finally made him change his mind. I think you're right. I think if it was Liz Truss in his place, she probably still, because she's a massive free market sort of person, so she wouldn't want to have any detriment on the economy at all. And I think she'd be vigilant on this herd immunity stuff and would have continued with it and continued with it and continued with it. This I think you're right. Right.
This is thick as I think yes, Mark. Thick as shit. Yeah.
How does that happen? It still amazes me. I think there's going to be some several books and stuff coming out about this. How she actually managed to become prime minister, because the weirdest thing about it, like her bonkers tax breaks were all out in the open to become leader. I mean, she was voted on this stuff. The Tory members voted her in with these tax cuts. So it's not like she got in and suddenly all this bonkers ideas came out. They were there originally. She got voted in on that. That's what baffles me as well. I mean, she's nuts, but the Tory members voted her in. How did that even happen?
Very good to hear from QA Library here. Bojo pushed for a big amount of housing installation and 8K solar panels for all new buildings of housing, but due to house builders' donations to the party, this was stripped away. This was obviously he wanted to do certain things, and he wanted to do certain things that were popular, but the Conservatives didn't want to do things that were popular. They wanted to do things that their donors and their naysayers wanted. I think that's a really important point when it comes to Johnson, because he did, obviously, because you still hear to this day people on the radio or people talking or whatever say Boris Johnson was a nice guy. I thought he was a good politician and all this. And I was just like, yeah, he also wanted a garden bridge in London. That's all. I will never forget that story about him wanting a garden bridge in London. I was just like, have you got better things to spend the British taxpayers on in London than building a garden bridge?
Nuts.
Novelty stuff, guys. Oh dear. I'm not sure about this from Phil. She slept her way to the top. She wouldn't sleep with anyone who voted for her. I don't think anyone would want to sleep with her. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you're talking about someone else there. Maybe Nadine Dorries and Boris.
Nadine Dorries, yeah, that's
and Boris Johnson. I think makes more sense there than anything. Is what I will say on that. Guys, if you have any questions, please feel free to throw them in the chat. Just a real quick reminder, if you haven't already, please hit the like button. Great, appreciate it. Share it across social media so others are notified of this live stream. If you haven't subscribed to both our channels, please do. Link for VanMan Talks YouTube channel is in the description, as well as his metal channel. So if you like that kind of music, definitely check that out as well, guys. So please do check out those. Do check out our VanMan's channel if you haven't already, guys. Let's see what else is. One Angry Pagan says, unfortunately, tribalism is just natural to us in war, especially past a certain pop threshold. The question is how to define political social tribalism so as to be as democratic as possible. Wow, what such a difficult answer. I don't see how. I guess the first answer would be, well, I think it starts with social media more than anything, because social media is opened a new dynamic into politics, I would say, more than anything since it's come in. That has really changed and influence is definitely influenced, I would say, influenced how people think and feel about not just obviously political, but any things in general. Because what social media has done, and I think this is really important, is what it's done is that, especially if you're somebody that likes to be in a certain bubble and don't like to be pushed out of that bubble, don't like to face engagement or difficult conversations and whatnot, and you stay in those certain Facebook groups or certain YouTube channels and certain media outlets and whatnot, and you become embroiled in those same conversations, in those same talks, in those same groups of people all the time, to get to a point where you are embedded in so much in those beliefs that you refuse to listen to any other sides, any other discussions whatsoever. And I think that is a I'm not sure how you would break that cycle, or if you can break that cycle. I think that's just social media. When you're talking about it in general, I'm not quite sure. I don't know if you've got an answer possibly to this extremely difficult question.
Yeah, I mean, that's one side of it. Like you just said, the social media, especially the Reform Party tribalism will come from. But also, it's the tribalism to me as well is that wealthy, middle-aged Tory voter that's still, regardless of anything. You mentioned Boris Johnson earlier. There was an interview, well, I think it was on Political Joe, of that woman that loved Boris Johnson, whatever. And it is pure tribalism. It's pure tribalism, and nothing you say against him will ever make you vote differently. It's such a strange thing, and it seems to a lot of tribalism actually comes from people that aren't really politically engaged as well. Like I just mentioned, they just have this instinct, and I guess it's Labour voters as well, that every polling day, every time there's an election, I vote Conservative because that's what I do, because that's what people like me do. But yeah, I mean, social media is a massive driving force for this. I've spoken about it on the channel quite a few times. I have family members that are so far down this Reform Party rabbit hole, and you can't do anything. You can't do anything, and they fit the example of exactly what you just said. They won't listen to any counter argument to it, even if you bring legitimate grievances against their arguments, because they're just they're just flooded with this stuff on Twitter and social media all day long. Whenever they see something about a migrant, it's something negative. Whenever it's something about an immigrant, it's something negative. They never see the Muslims down the church giving out food to the homeless. They don't see any of the other side of what's going on. They're just getting the negative. And I don't know how you solve that. This is what I say about Twitter. It's pure poison. And I know that since Musk has come along, it's injected more of it.
Yeah, that guy's not helped at all, has he?
Weirdest thing about that guy is you get all his posts on your stream, even though you don't follow him, even though, like, that is a power in itself, isn't it? That's like a superpower in itself, that he owns Twitter, so he can put his posts on every single person's Twitter account feed.
He forces he forces the algorithm to you whether you want to follow him or not. You'd have to block. I think you have to block him to literally do it. I mean, I've not blocked him because because I do sometimes want to see what he says, but I think I've only ever once responded to a tweet from him. But a very good point. Phil McCracken says, that's easy. A written constitution and a regulated media. Oh, if only it was that simple. It probably is that simple, but it's just a case of actually having the politicians and the will to actually implement it. The regulated media is definitely a big thing, but I'm sure, as you are aware, is that the stories that we are hearing is that Labour don't want to impose Leveson 2, apparently is what the rumor mill is of what we're hearing, and that they don't intend to regulate any kind of media, which is kind of a problem, because until we do, people are always going to fall for misinformation or disinformation and stick to their bubbles. And those who I wouldn't say sometimes Talk TV and GB News, like sometimes they don't actually give misinformation, disinformation. It's when they discuss something, it's about how it comes across and the tone and the language that they use and where it comes across to people. That, I think, is just as dangerous as whether it's this information itself, because that really does play a part, especially when they talk about something so aggressively and so angrily, and then that fuels into people's mindset. So I do think regulated media and some kind of written constitution, I agree with Phil, definitely is definitely something there.
Yeah, well, that's what you say about GB News. Oh, sorry, go on.
I was just going to say number 3 there says education, long-term strategic. Education definitely is another part to play. Is definitely a fundamental part. But yes, go on.
Yeah, well, I mean, your points on GB News and Talk TV, I mean, that's how they work. They take like the shred of truth, every single bit of their stories, every story they put out has a tiny bit of truth on it. So the big ones that they're going for at the moment, isn't it, is Starmer, and he's going to take away your free speech because of the riots, because he's putting people in prison for stirring up these riots, for stirring up violence, for he's going to take away your free. So the little bit of truth is that he wants to put people in prison because they're stirring up violence, which is completely within the law. Of course, we want to put people in prison for causing violence and hatred. That's in our law. But they take that little bit of truth. It's like, he's going to take away your freedom of speeches. You're going to be in prison for a tweet. So they always have that little shred of truth. And the same thing, like I was saying, they just spend all day just looking for all the negative stories they can find from migrants and refugees. If you spend all day, and the way that we deal with migrants and refugees is appalling anyway. So of course we get the example of people acting out and people doing things they shouldn't, and they're searching for those stories. So going back to the original question, how do you regulate that? The big thing about regulation was in the past with your printed press, with Murdoch and stuff like that. But now you're dealing with social media. In the grand scheme of things, maybe GB News and things like that, and the printed press now is reasonably harmless compared to the social media side of it, I think. How do you regulate?
But Angela Rayner was dancing at a nightclub. Apparently that was such a big problem. Obviously, Michael Gove allegedly smoking cocaine and dancing at a nightclub was not as big of a story, though. When he was.
The thing that this is what I think. That as soon as I heard people with this Angela Rayner thing, I just thought, if that was Nigel Farage, they'd be celebrating him. They'd be like, "Oh yeah, out getting pissed, having a fag," because it's Angela Rayner can't do that. But Nigel Farage, and this is the thing. I mean, if this is the worst that you can throw at Angela Rayner, bearing in mind we just have 14 years of corrupt PPE contracts and test and track and money being spent on Walpole and all this corruption from the Tories. If the worst you can throw at Labour is Angela Rayner likes to have a dance and a drink when she's on her holiday,
how dare she let her hair down and party like that? She's supposed to be a deputy prime minister. How dare she?
Just makes me laugh. Yeah.
For those who haven't seen, there was Max covered a great video of her responding to all this with an interview with Kate Burley on Sky. It's absolute brilliant. She just ripped it all apart, just saying politicians need to have downtime. They need to have downtime. And it's no different to anybody else. Yes, of course, countries in crisis and Labour need to try and fix it of some sorts. Yes, of course, but Politicians need to have downtime as well.
I don't know. This is what I'm saying, though. I don't understand why she's not being selling. You know, back in the old Labour go, you used to have like John Prescott out having a pint, and they would go, "Yeah, go on, you know, Labour. You know, they like to have a beer." I don't know why the same thing. Why Angela Rayner just gets attacked? She just gets attacked for anything that she does by the right wing press. They absolutely despise her. And she should be celebrated as this, you know, sort of working class northerner that is, you know, she should be celebrated by the working class. But the right wing press have done this sort of amazing job of just vilifying her every single time she does something.
Interesting question from interesting point there from Chatty Rat when it comes to the Constitution. And when it comes to a written Constitution, the question is who decides the adaptation and subsequent amendments? The people in referendums or Parliament? See, the moment, like, the thing is, the moment we had the EU referendum, Nigel Farage is using that as an excuse to say, "Oh, we need to let the people decide on everything regarding referendum." Like that's the thing that Nigel Farage has been constantly saying: referendum on this, referendum on that, referendum on this, and it's just like if we're going to start letting everyone decide things with referendums, what's the point of politicians and having a parliament where they're supposed to make the decisions for us? Isn't that what we paid them to do? Isn't that what they're paid to make these decisions for us at the end of the day? That would be that's why I would say no to the referendum. I would absolutely agree it should be with Parliament. If the UK was to have a written constitution of some sorts, I would say that if it was to pass, the only way that I would enshrine in a written constitution is that you would need at least 60 or 70% of Parliament to vote in favour of amending that constitution once it comes in place. Like something really like to make it as because there's no point having a constitution put in if it could just be changed by the next government because they have the majority in Parliament. It would, for me, it has to be the case of like 60, 70, 80% of all MPs are in favour of changing this written constitution, because that way then you don't have a political party or a coalition basically overriding something that the overwhelming majority of the public want that could deem to be a threat or harm so-called British democracy, if you want to call it.
I agree. It just there's no point of the constitution if you can change it. It would just be the same as before, wouldn't it? But with your referendums, though, that's an interesting one. I can't remember which country it is, but there is a country in Europe that love a referendum, isn't there? I can't remember which one it is. They have quite a few referendums. I'm not actually opposed to them, but it depends what it is. Like I said, with Brexit, it's an incredibly complex situation where you've got a million different ways Brexit can be. You know, simply voting out or in gives 100 different results. So that something like that shouldn't be done on a referendum. But I think something like I often thought with Rwanda, when the government are doing Rwanda, and if they just went to the public and just went, thinking about doing this, what do you think? You know, I generally think the public were not in favour and thought it was a bit of a waste of money. Just something simple. We were like, should we do this? No, don't do it. When it's really simple, just a simple yes or no. I'm not that adverse to. I don't mind a referendum, but on real complex things like Brexit and leaving the EU, they're not good.
Yeah, I would say Simon says 55 a referendum on Farage's citizenship. Well, the only problem is that as much as it sounds good on paper, problem is that the third most votes in the UK went to reform. So if you were to ask those same people, the UK citizens to vote on a referendum on stripping Farage of his citizenship, I generally think that he would not lose it. So I don't think it would work because there's still he has his fan base. You know, he has his fan base. So I don't think it would work there.
I'd be more in favour of giving him citizenship just for Clacton, so he can actually just stay in Clacton and do his job.
You have to take away his other passports. Switzerland holds a lot of referendums, Suzanne. Yes, they do actually.
Yes,
I think that was the one you were referring to earlier. Yes. A general constitution committee voted once every 10 to 15 years by PR. Yeah, potentially. Maybe that's another option. Maybe every 10 to 15 years. There's definitely a long period as well. That could definitely be an option as well. Phil says American Constitution is based on Scottish constitutions. The king swore to, but turned off the cameras because it would have been awkward. I don't know. I don't know enough about Scottish politics. That's why I'm very pleased to have Jenny on in a couple of weeks' time. I know she doesn't talk. She's more about Scottish history rather than politics, but I do think she'll have a better insight than I will on it. That's for sure. When it comes to Scottish politics,
Quite feisty, the old Scots with their politics, and they'll get into many fun conversations.
Yeah. QA Library says Switzerland have so many laws they like to. One result was thrown out because the literature given out was not up to the prescribed level. Wow. Guys, if you've got any final questions, let us know before we wrap things up. If you've got any other final questions, feel free to put them in the chat before we wrap up, because we've been going nearly about an hour and a half now. If you got so what are you going to be? What's I guess the question as we start to wind down, I guess, is what are you thinking about your channel? Is just carrying on doing what you're doing in terms of it? I mean, what you feel like, considering what you've done so far with it? And obviously it has been 2 months obviously since Labour. We finally got rid of the Tories, but obviously there are still problems. But
I've lost your sound, Regan.
I was just about to say, what happened to my mic?
Oh, you're back. You're back.
There we go.
Yeah, sorry, I got the majority of that question.
Yeah, go on.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I did sort of come at a crossroads once the election came, because I mean, I've been spending the last 3 years just putting out content, just damning the Tories every single day. So I knew it would probably have to change up with a Labour government, and you know, I'm not averse to actually, you know, calling this Labour government out when I think they're going wrong. But I am definitely looking into doing a little bit more we're doing right now, and what you're doing is just talking to guests. I want to do a weekly segment where I just bring on someone in certain industries. I want to talk to people that have worked in education in the country, in police in the country, in the prison system, in immigration and things like that, and just find out their views on how we can fix this country. You know, I want to dive into all those topics, because I'm fascinated. I mean, that's really what my channel's been over the years, really, just a learning, just a constant sponge, just absorbing all this information that I get from people that comment on my videos and people that I've spoken to. And but yeah, I'm definitely more interested in doing what you're doing, and just having a guest on once a week, which I will be starting up most likely next week, once a week. And I'll still be in the van, because I know people enjoy
enjoy the sightseeing just as much as your knowledge, because every now and then you'll have something in the video where someone's done something stupid, or you see something really interesting, like the I think was this the last video you had the Jurassic Park Jeep coming past. I love that. I was thinking to myself, now they need to get the dinosaur in. And
well, that's the thing, you have to refer to it. Sometimes I'll be talking about a serious subject, and then a Jurassic Park Jeep goes driving past. You know, you have to acknowledge it. Or someone walks out in front of you when you're trying to drive along.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people do enjoy just my views from the van, which I'll carry on doing, of course.
And that's exactly why, guys, you need to watch all the way to the end of his video, so you can see, so in case you missed it, but you'll see it right at the end there, because that's what he had set at the end. Just a couple of quick fire ones. Number 3 is just asking, how's the van going for you? The van itself.
Number 3, thanks for popping on. I've seen you in my comments quite a few. I've answered quite a few of your comments. Yeah, the van's great. I'm actually going to buy it, so I lease my van. It's an electric van, and I've been leasing it for the last 3 years. And yeah, I'm going to buy it. I love it. It's great for me. It's perfect. And no tax and all that good stuff that comes with an electric van. Cost me £1 a day to charge, rather than the extortionate diesel prices. So yeah, it's great. I'm loving the van.
Yeah. Billy Kershaw asks, do you ride a motorbike?
No, never. I'm sure if you're asking that question, Billy, that you're a biker, but no, they scare the crap out of me. I don't mind the little Vespas, like when I go to the Philippines or something, the little scooters, but no, motorbikes scare the crap out of me.
I would have liked to have talked about the Philippines more with you, but I guess because we're starting to wind down a little bit. But we'll finish on this last question, a very important one for VanMan. Does he like badgers and supports the end to the cull of badgers?
Wow, what a question. Do you know what's funny about badgers? You know, like people have things that they collect just randomly when they're a kid. They get like a couple of penguin toys or something, and then suddenly you're into penguins and everyone starts buying you penguin stuff. Well, I had that with
Yeah.
badgers, and I've got loads of like badger doorstops and badger things. So I love badgers. As for the badger
Oh,
cult, I mean, I honestly don't know enough about the subject. I mean, generally, I wouldn't be in favor of killing animals. But I'm not a farmer. I don't know what their effects are on you know, these sort of things. I'm not knowledgeable enough on the subject, and as always with subjects I don't know enough about, I stay clear and stay neutral. But
you said
generally, I
you're
will
not
never be
against
in
you're not
favour.
against you're not against the killing of badgers only unless there is sufficient evidence of reason to do so, shall we say?
Yes, yeah. I'd never
If
be in
that,
favour of killing any animals unless there's
yeah,
sufficient evidence to do so.
yeah, something along those lines. Like, I'm not a bad person, but
Yeah, that one.
can you put it that way? So, VanMan, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate you giving your time to come on and chat with me. It's an absolute pleasure, and I would love to have you on again in the future. And seeing as how you're going to be starting up your own one, if you ever want me to come onto yours and talk about anything at all, I'm more than welcome. I'm more than welcome to join you.
Yeah,
Join you on
definitely.
your channel if you ever have me. Obviously, there are far more knowledgeable people out there. I'm sure you would love to have as well. But
No, I'd
I
love to have
really
you on, mate. I really enjoyed talking to you. It was great fun. Really good.
yeah, it was really good. I really do think it was a lot of knowledge that we have both learned from each other and from those in the chat. And I really want to say a massive thank you to everyone who's come along here. Thank you guys for all your comments. I really do appreciate it. Sorry if we didn't get to all of your questions if we didn't, but we do appreciate everybody coming out of your way to watch us tonight and listening and hopefully you guys may have learned something new or maybe something not, but anyway, all do leave your feedback and comments down in below after the live stream and let us know what you guys thought of it as well. Just a quick reference for me before I start coughing again, because I've been coughing quite a lot before the live stream, and luckily I've managed to keep it at a minimum, so which is quite amazing. I've got no live stream tomorrow. God damn it.
At least it's come in the last few minutes, sorry. And so
Yes.
before we started, Regan said, I think I'm gonna struggle because I've got a real cough, and and you were coughing loads just before we came on stream.
Yeah.
And the whole pretty much hour and a half, I haven't heard you cough once. So at least
I was coughing a few times, but I was just trying to hold it in, I suppose. That is what I was trying to do. But I'll go on a coughing spree after I've turned off the end stream button, guys. Just a quick reference for me, guys. So no live stream tomorrow. I may do a premieres for the weekend, possibly. It depends how I'm feeling. I might not, but I'll definitely be back with a live stream on Monday for you guys with another Snowflakes viewpoint. We'll cover some of the latest news happening in the UK. Just a reminder, next week, Thursday, 8 p.m, myself and Terry Regan will be doing a Snowflake talk. I'm very excited to talk to you, Terry. I know you're there lurking in the chat. We were talking about talking a bit about his channel and about his work as a Plymouth activist as well. So I'm really looking forward to that. And obviously the following Thursday, myself and Random Scottish History will obviously be a very good one there. So I'm really looking forward to that one. And then hopefully, cross fingers, there's no issues. Myself and hopefully Lee Corn will join me at the end of the month for a talk as well, because it's been a long time, but it won't be a Snowflake show. It'll just be like what I'm doing here with VanMan. We'll be talking about all sorts of things. So plenty more to come here on this channel and plenty more to come on VanMan Talks, this channel. Do check it out if you haven't already. youtube.com/VanMan Talks. And if you're a fan of metal, a fan of music, just do check out his metal, VanMan Metal. What's his channel called, Dave? It's in the description.
VanMan Talks Metal.
VanMan Talks Metal. So if you like metal, guys, do check it out. And give him some love on that channel as well, guys. I'm sure at some point you'll try and get maybe OneDrive. You'll just talk about find a reason to talk about heavy metal again. You need to just get a video out there once a month. Maybe try to get on there. I think your last video was like 6 months ago or something.
Yeah, I know. I've neglected it. I need to get back on it. I need to grow it.
So yeah, guys, thanks guys so much for your again. And I bet I need to do the outro stuff, don't I? All right, get my voice together. If you haven't already, please hit the like button. We greatly appreciate it. Share this across social media so others are notified of this live stream. If you haven't subscribed to either of our channels, please do so. So it helps support the algorithms for both of us. And if you want to financially support me or VanMan and the work that we both do on our channels, we both have YouTube memberships, so feel free to check them out on both our channels. Links for mine is in the description. Link for VanMan's will be on his channel in his description. And thank you to everyone, whether you've liked, shared, subscribed, or given some of your money to support us financially. We greatly appreciate it. Take care, everyone, and we hope to catch you all very, very soon.